all. Today we're meeting with Colette Canchola-Cox. And Colette, welcome to Accessible.
Thank you.
We are so excited to have you here.
Yeah.
So we'll just state up front, we know you because we work together, but we know that you are the director of the Missouri Family to Family program. But before we really start with that, let's just talk a little bit about how did you get into the developmental disability field?
That's a great question. I kind of entered the field, I guess, in because of a personal connection. When my son, Gunnar, was about 15 months old, he started receiving a different diagnosis for developmental disability. His first diagnosis was autism. And I really didn't know a lot about it. So I started learning about what autism was and what family support organizations were and kind of what was out there. And one thing led to another. And now I'm here.
Okay. How did, what did you learn about autism, or what was it a shock to you? Like, what was that like to discover that?
Yeah, it was a shock to us. You know, my husband and I, neither one of us had ever met a person with autism. And he had, he was one of the children that had a sharp regression. Mm-hmm. So in some ways that was good because we noticed really quickly that things had changed for him and we weren't sure what they were. But his diagnosis process was kind of traumatic for us, I think, because we were having a wait list and I was having to call back. I was getting all these tips from these more seasoned parents, like, you got to call back and be really nice and just keep telling them you can come tomorrow if anyone cancels. And so luckily with their guidance, I had gotten him in at that time. I think the wait list was like 9 months long.
Wow.
For a diagnosis. And we had managed to, in a 2.5 month period, get first steps in place, early intervention in place, and then get a diagnosis. Now, we were a little shocked by the diagnosis. We were thinking we were going to go and they were going to say, by then we had already pretty much figured out on our own that he had an autism diagnosis, he was experiencing autism. But we kind of expected they would say like, yeah, he's got a little autism. He's going to grow out of this. Like in our minds, sure. That's what we were thinking. Like, just give us a couple appointments and we'll be on our way and he'll be back on track. And so I think for us, like the physicians, the team, we were really kind of shocked because they were saying, they were very serious and stern. And they said, he had the most profound autism they'd ever diagnosed.
Wow.
And we were like, wow. Not what we thought we were going to hear today.
Right.
And so they were like explaining to us that even with that he didn't have the capacity to learn, even with picture exchange systems, 40 hours of ABA, just really no matter what we did, he was not going to progress. And so they just wanted us to know up front to save our money on that and start thinking about adult placement for him and kind of preparing us that as he got older, he would become aggressive. And it was just a very and you have to think, Gunnar is 12 now. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't that long ago.
No.
Right. I mean, we're not talking like he got a diagnosis in 1982. And wow. I mean, so we pursued additional second opinions because we were like, these people don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
Was it that, or were they just, do you think, I can't even hardly believe that happened.
I think that, I really do. I mean, I think that they really believe that. I think they were really trying to prepare us. I think in some ways they knew that maybe our ideas around autism were not maybe accurate or something. And they were trying to kind of prepare us for, I think he's not going to grow out of autism.
Right.
He's always going to experience autism. I do think that he did have, knowing what I know now, he was experiencing a lot of challenges to his day to day. And I think that they did believe what they were saying. Uh-huh. We just, at that time, we're like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about.
Well, it's amazing that you had the foresight to say, I don't think they're exactly correct about this. Let's pursue a second opinion or go on our own and find something instead of just accepting at face value what they were saying about Gunnar.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little tough, I think, too, at that time, because, I mean, socially, because some people did know what we were told, and they just, they kind of thought me and my husband needed to tone it down with the...
That you guys needed to tone it down?
With the supports and the expectations and the providing him opportunities. I think that some of that kind of resonated with people, and they were like, your guys' expectations for him, for his involvement in the community, for his experiences, all that is a little much, don't you think? And we were like, no, we don't.
We disagree.
Actually, we disagree. And we think, and part of that is we kind of thought about, process what made that diagnosis so hard. And really what it was that day in that moment, we were hearing that Gunnar would always be the kid down the room in the basement classroom. He wasn't going to get to play. We knew that society was counting him out at that moment. And so when we kind of processed that, and we were like, okay, what are we going to do for our community, for him, for other kids, to other parents? Because that's really what's traumatic about the diagnosis. Mm-hmm. You hear a lot of parents say that part is kind of traumatic. Well, if they're there, they probably know their kid's experiencing some sort of developmental disability. Mm-hmm. So it's not that makes it traumatic. It's the kind of reality of what that means for their child in society, I think, at least for us.
This sort of self-reflection you did on the diagnosis experience, was that right after, or is this how many years down the line from the diagnosis to kind of thinking through, why was that traumatic? What will we do about it?
I think it took me a while to really process through that. I think at that time, what was really beneficial to us was connecting with those seasoned parents. We connected with the Missouri Family Resource Center. We got a peer mentor. We connected with some people locally, and those were the people that were like, no, you're right. He is going to, he should get to go to school. And so those were the people that really picked us up and really were our support system when nobody else really understood what that was going to mean for him. And they really, strangely enough, the people also didn't understand his rights. So I could call my mom, and I could call some of these people I went to school with, great people, but they didn't really understand disability rights. They didn't understand why I'm so fired up about whatever this IEP meeting was. And so I really needed to have that other support system that really understood some of the things we were experiencing in our life as a family with a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and what that meant. I remember, I remember his kindergarten transition. When he was in kindergarten, when we went to enroll, they were like, oh, he can't go here because kids with autism all go to this other program. Oh. He can't go to his neighborhood school. And we were like, well, he's here. And I remember a lot of people, it was the other parents that we had met up until that point. So from 2 to 6 that we had met, that really were our support system during that time, because a lot of other people were like, well, maybe he would be better at the specialized program. Maybe he should ride the bus 35 minutes to the other school, the other side of town, because they really I think that they just didn't know enough about the topic at the time.
Yeah. And
they didn't really understand those concepts of inclusion. They didn't really understand that, the research around why, why we were pursuing some of those opportunities for him, I guess.
Right. And you were learning them from other families.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So did you feel like once you sort of pushed, the school to say, no, he does belong here. Mm-hmm. He legally has a right to be here. Mm-hmm. Did you still get pushback or from the school or parents, or what was that experience like?
Oh yeah, we we got a lot of pushback. I think from the district, we even got pushback from other parents. I mean, just the reality of it is, we had made friends with some folks, some other families back in preschool. Mm. And so when we decided that wasn't the right path for our child, that also caused a little, I don't want to say division, but some strange dynamics with some of those other families, because they're like, well, that program's good enough for our kid. Why do you? So
Gotcha.
it kind of created a lot of different things. That year was rough for us, for Gunnar. I mean, because we were really doing something that wasn't being done in our community at the time. Kids with autism went to the autism program. And at one time that was really great. And even local families fought lawsuits to even have those programs in place. But we really didn't feel it was the best path for him. And so it was an interesting time in his life. And I think my main thing too has always been is I don't know why, I've always had this strong desire that Gunnar would never feel like he wasn't allowed at any table. And that he would always be welcome, and that we would always push for that and model that for him, that it's just like not okay for people to not include you in a decision or not invite you somewhere because you have autism. And so we really started modeling that really young. And sometimes that was really hard and really uncomfortable. I'm actually not a very confrontational person. And so some of those conversations, early conversations, were really, really tough, because I was almost retraining my brain too, because that wasn't something that my husband and I had ever really experienced. And really just kind of helping people to like take a look at their, like, learning about what ableism is, and then also like examining their behavior as well. Like, I remember when he was in kindergarten, they didn't want him to go to lunch with other kids because he like moved his feet. And I'm like, under the table, and it was like a distraction. I'm like, oh, these are like kindergartners. Like,
what kindergartner is not shuffling their feet or any body part, honestly, at lunch?
So we would have to go and like point this out. Like, he's verbally stimming in the lunchroom, but other kids are talking. And so like, why is he the only kid that has to sit silently in the lunchroom? Right. And I mean, you would see like light bulbs go off for people sometimes. They'd be like, oh, I don't know. Now that you mention it.
Right. Like the expectation was different, but they couldn't even see or verbalize why.
Right.
Yeah. And I imagine those conversations didn't just happen at the school level, but maybe like with other relationships in your life, with family, or where you had to sort of advocate like, no, Gunnar will be assumed capable like every other child in our family, or would that be true?
Yeah. I think so. I think one thing that I think we've been pretty fortunate about is I have a lot of siblings. My husband has a lot of cousins, and they're all really close. And Gunnar was kind of fortunate in one sense that he's kind of like the in-between kid. Okay. So it was like he kind of had these like maybe 5 years where it was like Gunnar time all the time for everybody. And so I think some of that made it a little easier for everyone to adjust and to learn about how to best support him, I think.
Yeah. Wow. So you're helping Gunnar get through school. You're kind of breaking into that whole system. At some point, you became a professional within the DD service field. How did that come about, or what prompted you to do that? So
pretty quick. I guess it was a couple years in, but my mentor that I was connected with had a nonprofit in my area. And so I got really involved with that nonprofit and started doing a lot of the community relations stuff, hosting support groups and things like that. And it's kind of interesting. My family in general is very community organizer focused. So it kind of came a little naturally. But so then the director of a county board started showing up to our support group meetings. And I was like, what is she doing here?
And by county board, you mean a developmental disabilities county board?
Yes. She started showing up and like observing Part of those support groups had kind of moved into kind of an advocacy coaching type thing. And then so when professionals started showing up, I'm like, I need you guys to leave because we're in top secret discussions here and you were not invited. But what happened is she called. Well, she didn't personally call. She started having other people call and said, hey, we've got this job opening up for a family navigator to help families learn how to navigate system support them. I was also very outspoken at the time that navigating systems and the entire process could not be any more confusing, any less family friendly to people who are getting, kind of just plunked in the system. And so I made no secret about things that I thought could be better. And so I kind of feel like at the time Lynn was like, challenge accepted, make it better then. Figure it out. If you know so much, if you think this is, could be done so much better, then you should come and do it then. I mean, I don't think I realized that at the time, but I always have these things that I process later. I'm like, she was probably like,
the director.
Yeah, she was probably like, you think it can be done so much better? Well, come and do it then. So I started doing the family navigation program when Gunnar was in 4. So he's in his 4.5. He was in his last year of preschool. And that worked out really well because I could be, it was still pretty flexible around his schedule. So that's how I kind of started. From there, I worked that position for about 7 years. And then I applied to be the director of the Missouri Family to Family program. So it was kind of taking some of those same concepts and moving to a more state level. Yeah.
So can you talk about what is the Missouri Family to Family?
So Missouri Family to Family is the statewide resource center. So there are several different service offerings within that. So information and referral can help families kind of figure out where to start. There's systems navigation that's a little bit more of that coaching and problem solving. And then there are things like the peer mentor program. We also have good life groups, which are more of like an action-based support group that are, we call them like peer learning collaboratives. So we have an opportunity to talk about a specific topic. So maybe it's IEP planning, maybe it's transportation. So we kind of take those hot topics that people call and need information over and host a group around those and help people think through their next steps.
When you think about sort of what's happening in our state and what's going on, what are some of the hot topics, the things that either parents are asking to know about or that you think they need to know about that are going on?
I would say the hot topic, our number one call-in item is childcare.
Ooh, yeah.
Childcare, poverty type things, families in particular of younger children don't have access to childcare because of their child's disabilities, because the child care center doesn't feel equipped. And then that's either turning a 2-income home into a 1-income home, or it's turning a 1-income home into no income. And there's really nothing that there are resources and we help, identify Head Starts and some programs, but it really seems to be an issue that's rising over the last, I would say 2 years or so. And it's really a pain point for families. I think for adults that are calling, because we support people all the way through the lifespan, I think a lot of adults are calling about their rights, about guardianship issues, about supported decision making. I think those are probably the 2 biggest topics. I think if I have to recommend that families learn something, it would be to learn how to get connected, to learn where there are either support groups or good life groups or people first chapters, whatever it is that makes them feel like they have a support system, whether it's calling us and getting a mentor. I think that is instrumental to people feeling having the strength to do some of the things they need to do, and having someone that you can ask questions to. I mean, about whatever it is they have going on. Because I think oftentimes people have navigated the situation before or the system before, and they can really help give some of those tips, because it really is really individualized and complex oftentimes. Where you live, what insurance you have, how old the person is, what their diagnosis is. I mean, there's so many specific things that can make it hard to really figure out where to go for information.
So what, I mean, God, what does a family do that has to go from 2 to 1 income household or 1 to 0 income household? I mean, how do they make it? What?
I'm not, we made it out. It was very tough, you know, and that was another thing I didn't talk about. And our personal story was, you know, we experienced poverty for the first time, both of us, my husband and I, because I wasn't able to work. And I think that happens to a lot of families. And I think it really causes so much stress because you've got added expenses, added medical expense, and loss of income. And then, you know, especially for some families, I think that's where some of the frustration kind of comes in at times when they're trying to access systems is you make, even on one income, you make too much for state insurance for Medicaid, but you don't have the money to pay for these services. And so everyone's kind of saying, you should sign up for speech therapy. Like, you keep hearing a lot of like what you should do, but you can't afford to do it. And so I think that kind of causes some challenging or I would say probably stress for the family that's trying to figure out what really do they need to do to help their child. Because I think sometimes they feel a little powerless and trapped in this really bad situation, and they can't figure out where do I go first. So
who in our state is collecting these stories of families that are identifying these huge gaps, like gaps in early childhood care for children with disabilities? So that way, those that are able to make policy decisions or legislative decisions are aware of where people are falling through the cracks.
So in Missouri, I'm collecting as much of that information as I can. We have a process now where if we get so many calls around a certain thing, we start tracking. And we kind of keep track of that. Like, we kind of have that process as a team. And then we have a plan to deliver these sort of things to George, to Shelley, to different people. You know, the DD Council wants access, if the division wants access, whoever wants access to this information so that they can plan. I think where I'm starting to see a lot of gaps is it's gaps in the community. There are gaps that are kind of outside of this DD system. It's like where they're like, oh, the you know, Division of Developmental Disability should do it. And really, they shouldn't. Because it's a community-based program. So I think just I'm collecting it, and I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to bring some of the community programs along. I think, you know, I used to find, at least in my smaller community, people just didn't know where to start, and they thought it had to be perfect, and I have to have a registered nurse to support this child because they have autism. And it's like, or they have to have a 1-to-1 aid. Sometimes that's the case, but maybe not always. And so I think it's, in a way, kind of helping people have the courage to start somewhere.
Sure. Like educating the community organizations and community leaders about ways that they could support or step in. I mean, the childcare one's a great example because so many early childhood centers are privately owned. And so for those that are making those decisions to just have some basic knowledge about disability and how they could support students with disabilities, maybe more would be open to like, oh, well, we could do that. We could support these kids to be in our center and not be so exclusionary because they're not aware of their own capacity.
Yeah, something we did in my other community was we had identified that this was a problem, and I thought at that time it was isolated to the more the smaller community,
right?
And so we were able to partner with the United Way Success by Six to where, and then also Missouri Western at the time, and created a micro credential. And so any child care worker for early childhood could have their education paid for this micro credential so that they would feel prepared to support the kids that have a developmental disability. And also it was like kind of working them towards like another program track. But for us, it really gave us a way to get some buy-in from some of the child care providers, because like, if you're a teacher, if you are in early childhood, you can get this for free.
Yeah.
What a great still exists, solution. That program? Oh, that's awesome. Is it only for Buchanan County or?
No.
So anyone can do that?
I think it's anyone anyone can take the program. I don't know the limitations on the United Way fund, but I would assume that's something that you could figure out in other ways. We just had a great mom who was at Missouri Western who decided to put it in place, and then just a great neighbor. She wasn't really anyone's neighbor, but she's just a really good community member at United Way that was like, hey, why?
What's
awesome happening
program.
With these families? And since their focus is to really think about poverty, it was really just having that larger conversation of we're creating poverty in our community. We have a lot of jobs that need filled. We have a lot of parents that are at home, unable to work. We could really, capture and we could really help a lot of different things if we would provide this to the child care workers.
Wow. What a great model. That sounds like it could be used widely throughout the state and in other states too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking at George, like a new project, we just need to find some funding for it.
I just think we quite literally work in every county with early childhood education in another one of our programs.
Yeah.
Why aren't we connecting?
I don't know. So we should.
Idea, light bulb, right?
Whew.
So we're going to do it.
Lights going off, guys.
We're going to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So then you mentioned adults. And so, I mean, we do needs assessments every couple of years in partnership with the DD Council or the Division of Developmental Disabilities or whatever partner. And we have a few things that always show up as the greatest needs. And I'm just wondering if you've heard about these things and what are some of the solutions you're encountering around the state. But one you already mentioned, which is guardianship and supported decision-making. I mean, I was shocked to learn that Missouri, well, maybe not, but Missouri is one of the leading states in the nation in terms of, and this isn't a good thing we want to lead, but in terms of having people with disabilities having a guardian other than themselves. And, but the other big one is transportation. And I'm just always baffled. How is it that we live in this country with so many vehicles and then why are we having such a huge transportation issue?
Yeah. Yes, on guardianship, that's one of the main ones. We connect with parents a lot. There's a lot of misinformation, I think, that happens before 18. And so I think connecting with people and giving them a little more education around that seems to help. For people that I think are over 30, those are oftentimes the people that are calling, trying to figure out now how to get their rights restored.
Right.
But we're trying to kind of provide parents with more options, more ideas, and more ways that they can be a participant and switch to that advocating with, not for role at 18.
Yeah.
And that seems to really help. Transportation does come up quite a bit. I keep asking questions around. I can't get any answers on it. So one question I've like been asking about is like, well, what if someone wants an accessible vehicle? Because, you know, there's always like you have to have a job first before we'll fund a vehicle. Like there's all these caveats all the time. But like, okay, what if someone wants to be accessible transportation? Like, what if they want to be a taxi driver? Like, can they get a man to like help them out with that? And then they can give other people rides.
Yeah.
Like,
I see. Yeah.
Can we start like kind of thinking? I think that transportation hasn't caught up yet with HCBS. You know, it used to be, we're going to have Oats, we're going to have these companies, and they're going to bus people. Everyone's going to go to the same school. Everyone's going to go to the same job. Everyone's going to go to the same church.
Right.
But as HCBS has really pushed for people to live in their communities and do what they want to do during the day, not have this kind of schedule. Like, people want to go listen to live music, they can. On a Friday night, they should. And so I think that our transportation infrastructure hasn't caught up with the idea that it's not going to be this school bus of adults
Right.
going to these programs, and that actually there needs to be more options, whether that's public transportation, whether that's the way that vehicles are funded, whether that's more driving programs that are specialized, or whether that's just, I think of like a mom who she let her daughter start her with a golf cart when she was like 12. She wrecked that golf cart, like, I'm not joking, like 43 times.
Wow.
But the mom kept getting it fixed, and she like made friends with some people that were like could help her like repair it, because she knew like my daughter's going to have to drive.
Right.
She's going to have to be comfortable driving. I need to really figure out what's happening with her driving. Like, is she getting distracted? Like, need to kind of watch and figure out how to support her. They figured it out. She does drive now. But I mean, it takes a lot of courage, or I don't know, maybe it's not courage. It took courage for the girl to keep trying to drive after she wrecked it that many times.
Right.
She never got hurt. But then also for the mom to like keep encouraging her to do it. It's not like, you wrecked this 3 times, we're done. And I always like kind of think about like, you know, how many times, I'll just say this in case my dad listens, but like how many times I like wrecked my cars and like backed up into stuff. Like I remember one time I was 16 or 16-ish. I might have been older, but I'm gonna give myself
Sure.
some
16.
grace.
That's
Like I
right.
backed up into like the big red pole at like the gas station. Like, how do I even do it? I don't know.
I mean, I've had some stories like that, Colette, I think.
My dad was like so annoyed. Like he was so mad. He was like, if he had the power to have revoked my license at that time, he would have.
Withdrawn.
But like, so really, I think going back to that like ableism piece of like really thinking through like, do we sometimes hold people with a disability to a way higher standard than we hold?
Right. You can never have an accident. You can never run into the pole pulling out of Sonic per se if you were getting tater tots, and those slots are so narrow.
I have a 16-year-old daughter, and just the other day we were backing out of our driveway. She backed out, put it into drive, put the car into drive, and then just drove straight into a light pole. How do you do that? Why didn't you turn? Like, I mean, you know. Anyway, so
Did she have any response, or did you revoke her license?
Did you say no more? We won't fix this car.
But
You wanted to, though,
I
didn't
was
you?
frustrated. Anyway, so I totally can relate. But it's pretty impressive that she was able to go through 43.
Yeah, it was a lot. That might not be an exact number, but I know it was a lot.
Yeah.
I can imagine though too, for that mother, that part of the motivation of sticking with it is like, this is also my independence, right? Like if you can learn to drive and transport yourself to places, you can have a life and I can have a life because I'm not being your chauffeur or having to organize your transportation, right? So the motivation is also how does the needs of this individual impact the family system?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly, like even with my daughter, I want her to drive so that
Right.
she can drive herself to school and I can get to work on time.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So anyway, I totally see this as one of the big things that I feel like we could actually solve if we can be creative, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I really was hoping that I don't know if you guys saw about this a couple years ago. I was very excited for it. They were proposing, I don't know what happened. I'll have to Google it. They were proposing some kind of like, I'm not going to say the name right, but like some kind of massive train.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about, George? Do you know the actual name of it?
I just thought of it as like the super train from
Okay.
St. Louis to Kansas City.
Yeah.
I mean, do it in like a half hour.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, one of those like high speed ones. That
yeah.
A half hour.
Can you imagine?
Should you get sick?
I don't know, but I'm willing to try it. Yeah. And I think a lot of other people would be willing to try it to be able to get around the state. And
I mean, 30 minutes, you could work in St. Louis and just commute, come back to Kansas City or wherever.
Yeah. And especially for I know that some families are starting to utilize the train, and some adults with disabilities are starting to utilize the train in Missouri. As a public transportation to get from city to city. And I think these are things that like sometimes people just don't think about.
Right.
Like, I don't live in this city, but it's a better work opportunity for me, so I drive here. And you really think about when people are like, they can't leave their community or a 5-mile radius or somewhere that their mom can drop them off or a friend or a neighbor. It really limits where they can work, and or if it's like a good fit for them or where they want to work. And I always think about sometimes like when, you have to go through all your questionnaires of the family. It's like, why can't the neighbor drive him to school? It's like, well, the neighbor has a job too.
Right. Well, that's one question.
You can't always give a ride.
Right.
One thing, I mean, yeah, you live outside of Kansas City and come into town. Like, what supports do you need and do other parents need in order to be able to do that? Like what, I guess natural supports or otherwise that make that possible?
I think for employers, some of the things that I hear often are really looking at some of those remote and hybrid options that kind of eases some of the child care, just some of the different stressors or one more thing to manage. I think that's always a big one. I think I'm trying to think for like natural supports. I think I've used a lot of natural supports over the years for like every Thursday, my dad and my mom, since Gunnar was like 2, they take him to like his equestrian stuff. So it's like 1 hour a week in the spring, from like spring through summer, that I know that I can get a hair appointment. Like I can schedule something. It's like when like my husband and I go out to eat. It's like the Thursday after work because we have that hour time span to do that. So I really think for supporting people is really thinking about, and then also like if you're a member of a club, some sort of community-based club, and you notice that people, whether it be families or you notice that people with disabilities are included, kind of taking like a little inventory of like, is this accessible? Like, would people want to come? Could they use an invite to come?
How do you see the supporting families? Like how do you see that going, or what is anything on the horizon that is important that people need to be aware of?
I think on the horizon for supporting families, there are a lot of opportunities for like peer support training. And it's not just like peer support, but really professionalizing these skill sets that so many of the parents and the people with lived experience have really taking that a step further and being like, you're really, you already know how to do this. We're just going to give you a little bit more training so that you can really make a difference in people's lives. And that's what I see is on the rise, or more of a trend nationwide, is that more organizations are beginning to hire people with lived experience to fill some of those INR, it's information referral, system navigation type roles.
And actually, Missouri Family to Family just recently put out a job posting for that very thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what's the sort of vision for this individual in this role?
So we're looking for a life course fellow. So we are trying to identify a person with lived experience that can help. They'll learn about Trying Life Course, and they can really help us develop a leadership and advocacy training, really enhance what we have and help us to deliver that to other people that live in Jackson County, Missouri. So we're really wanting to find a person that lives in Jackson County that's 18 years or older. I'm gonna do my job posting here.
Yeah, do it. This is your time.
18 years or older to help us train. I guess train's not the right word. Provide some community education to help people learn about like what is self-determination. You know, that's kind of the first starting point is what is self-determination? What type of choices should you be able to make in your own life? How do you do that? For some generations, it comes a little easier. For others, not so much. We're really just hoping to find someone with lived experience to help us enhance the training and to also, so we can learn from them too. I mean, that's one thing I've learned over all my years in the field is I just learned so much from every family and every individual I connect with and really hearing their successes, their barriers, and just what their experience was, I think really helped me as I sit at tables with others who might be making decisions to consider. You know, I had my own experience. Gunnar has his own experience, but there are thousands and thousands of people across the state that all have their own. And so I think I always try to keep that in mind as we plan projects. So I don't live in Jackson County. So I'd really love to find someone that lives in Jackson County that really knows the ins and outs of all those pro tips.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that seems to be the theme running across what you're saying is just connecting, like not letting yourself be or letting your family be isolated and making sure that you connect with your community in a whole variety of ways.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Colette, if anyone wants to learn more about you or your program, how could they do that?
They can find us on Facebook.
Okay.
It's the best way, I think, if people are on social media. Missouri Family to Family. We have a website, M-O, familytofamily.com.
Well, I was like, I can see the wheels turning. Is it .org or .com?
And we
should look it up.
We'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll definitely will.
Try both.
And they can also call our 1-800 number that'll be in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
We'll make it easy to click the hyperlinks. But they can connect with us if they have questions about resources, questions about leadership. Just give us a call and see what we're about, and we will see if we can get you connected in anywhere.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Colette.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.